is box office prediction time, and as always, before we jump into our new round, we've got some Fantasy Movie League recapping to do. Going right to it here, we had a pretty solid week. We had 7 players in the prediction with Perri League get that perfect lineup. It was interesting watching the league this week fluctuate because I thought the player Devil was going to run away with this all on his own, but then when it goes from estimates to actuals, things shake up a little bit, and we had these 7 individuals wind up topping the list here. Delmar Dennis, Lola's, AP, LeFou's Cineplex, Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century, Mage Strike Cineplex, and J-Sort Geo Cineplex. Congratulations, guys. Job well done. I really do continue to have my work cut out for me if I'm going to catch any of you, because I had an okay week in the league last week, but I've got some work to do if I'm going to wind up at 100 or above in the league overall come the end of spring season. As far as my rankings go, my little 5 for 5 streak has officially been broken, but I'm pretty satisfied with where my Dumbo prediction landed because the movie did wind up opening up with $46 million. The pressure is really on for this one right now, though, to have those legs because it reportedly has a hefty production price tag of $170 million. Then at number 2, we had Us, which fell more than I expected, but it still posted a solid weekend 2 drop for a horror movie. It dipped 53% and made another $33.2 million. Number 3 then went to Captain Marvel, which held strong, falling just 40% and taking in $20.7 million. Then it was Newcomer Unplanned, which wound up exceeding expectations and kicking off its run in 4th place on the charts with a $6.4 million opening. And then finally, number 5 went to 5 Feet Apart, which continues its impressively slow decline. Here it only dropped a mere 27.5% and makes another $6.2 million. Kicking off this new round of predictions right now with my number 5 pick, it is Captain Marvel. There is no doubt in my mind that Captain Marvel is going to feel the effects of Shazam entering the race, but I don't think it's going to have a devastating impact on the movie this weekend for a number of reasons. There is a lot of competition out there in addition to Shazam, but I do think Avengers Endgame hype is going to help it out, and also it has had a fairly slow decline since it first hit theaters, so I'm going to look at last weekend's 40% drop and bring it up to 45%, and that still means the movie is making another $11 million this weekend. Now it is on to that number 4 spot, and that is where I have the movie Us. So remember last week's video when I was busy trying to figure out whether to compare it to Halloween or A Quiet Place, and I veered a little too closely to A Quiet Place? Well, I'm switching gears now. I learned my lesson. I'm looking at Halloween more so right now, and I think I have to do that with Pet Sematary entering the race this week because there is no doubt that movie is going to take a lot of the horror spotlight. However, I do know that Us wound up seeing a slightly smaller weekend 2 drop than what Halloween was hit with, so I am keeping that in mind right now, but looking at Halloween, and specifically its percent change on weekend 2 and weekend 3, that number did go up, and it actually went way up to 65% for Halloween. I do not think that's the kind of drop we're looking at for Us this time around, but I do want to consider the percent change trend, and that makes me want to bring last weekend's 53% drop up to 55%, and if that's what winds up happening, Us is making another $15 million this weekend. Now it's on to that number 3 position, and that is where I have Dumbo. So yet again, I am still concerned about Dumbo. Even with that A- cinema score, I still envision it taking a pretty big hit this time around. There's just so much competition in play at the moment. I'm going to take a look at the second movie in the Divergent franchise, the Divergent series, Insurgent, just to start here. So that movie came out roughly a similar time of year in 2015, and it opened with a pretty similar amount of money. Now, that movie did take a pretty harsh critical beating, whereas Dumbo wound up with more middling reviews, but part of the reason why I think they're going to stay in line is because Divergent, Insurgent at least, also got that A- cinema score. It was part of a hot franchise, but I feel like it just fizzled out. And even with the A- cinema score for Dumbo, I feel like the talk is fizzling out, especially with this weekend being the weekend to introduce big movies like Shazam and also Pet Sematary. So with all that in mind, I'm kind of inclined to bring down the Insurgent Weekend 2 drop just a little bit. It wound up falling 59%. I feel comfortable putting Dumbo at a 55% Weekend 2 decline, and if that's what happens, this movie's going to make another $20 million this weekend. Now it's on to number 2, and I'm sure you're probably already well aware of this, but it's a movie that I'm really excited about. This is where I have Pet Sematary. So yes, Us is well into its run right now, but I do think that Pet Sematary dropping so soon after Us's release will make a dent in its box office potential. However, I still think it's making good money this weekend because clearly, based on it, there is a high demand for Stephen King adaptations, and also the core concept for Pet Sematary is just such an easy sell in my mind, so I think that puts it in pretty good shape. To kick off my number prediction right now, I'm looking at the movie Truth or Dare, and I'm saying that mainly because it hit theaters when A Quiet Place was in its second weekend of release. And yeah, I know Us is in its third weekend this weekend, but then I look at what Truth or Dare was also up against in Rampage, and Rampage that weekend made less than what I think Shazam is going to make this weekend, so I think it's going to balance out. Anyway, looking at Truth or Dare, that movie kicked off its run with a $19 million opening. Now, let's factor in way better reviews for Pet Sematary and also the Stephen King hype. That makes me want to add something like $9 or $10 million to that movie's opening weekend total and come in with a $28 million start for Pet Sematary. And now it is time for that top spot, and of course it is going to the new DC film franchise entry, another movie on this list today that I absolutely adore. It is Shazam. Looking at some early projections for this one, the range seems to be $45 million to $55 million. I want to see this thing make all the money in the world, but I don't think I can go on the higher end of that range simply because there is so much competition right now. But if we learned anything from Aquaman, it's the importance of long legs at the box office, and considering I find Shazam to be such a crowd pleaser for both young moviegoers and adults alike, I do have a feeling this is going to benefit from really good word of mouth. Trying to figure out this opening total, though, I'm bringing my attention back to A Quiet Place, not because they're going after a similar audience, but more so because of how the profits were dispersed at the box office that weekend. So, A Quiet Place kicked off its run with $50 million. Also that weekend, we had Ready Player One making $25 million and Blockers making $20 million. So basically, even with Pet Sematary, Dumbo, Us, and Captain Marvel still in play, I think there's enough to go around to get Shazam $50 million this opening weekend. And that, of course, brings us to our recap of this week's box office predictions. I've got Shazam topping the charts with $50 million, Pet Sematary taking the 2 spot with $28 million, Dumbo coming in at number 3 with $20 million, then it's Us at number 4 with $15 million, and finally Captain Marvel taking my number 5 with $11 million. There you guys have it. Those are my predictions for the weekend. But as always, I leave it to you. Hit the comments below. Please put your picks right there. So curious to hear what you guys have to say about Shazam and Pet Sematary this time around. And going over to Fantasy Movie League, lock those lineups. We've got a bunch of heavyweights in the mix, so it will no doubt be a great week of the game. Before I say goodbye to you guys, I've got some Patreon shout-outs to give. A whole bunch of patrons from the month of April. It's our first box office prediction video of the month, and this first monthly shout out goes to Jefferson, Corey, Andrew, Paul, Cedric, and Craig. Guys, thank you. Some of you have been here for a little while, but for some of the newer additions, thank you, thank you, thank you. Get used to hearing that because I so greatly appreciate all the support in the Patreon community. It helps keep something that I love doing so much up and running. So again, thank you. And a huge thanks to everybody out there watching this video. As always, do not forget to like and share it, and then tune back in next week to see how we all did on our box office predictions.